Hey guys, welcome back to the Mogul Marathon Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Cudjoe-Virgil, and I'm very excited for our guest today. Our guest today is Onaje Barnes. He is a 15-year buy and hold landlord while currently working his 9 to 5 job. It's crazy. And he currently operates 50 doors without using any syndication. If anyone knows about syndication, it's basically when you raise the money to go out there and buy the properties, but with him, he bought 50 doors without using any syndication. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But as of now, he manages his company with some vertical integration within the single family, multifamily, and short-term rental space. Onaje, thank you so much for being on the show.
Man, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited. Congratulations on the show. Really love to get with you, man. We got to catch up. We haven't talked in a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's jump into it. Who is Onaje Barnes? How did you get to the level where you are today, all while doing this, with a full-time job?
Yeah, number one, I'm a regular dude. That's number one. I don't proclaim to be any really more than that. My background, kind of more of a rags to hopefully, lots more riches story. I grew up in hood of Houston, Third Ward, Houston, Texas. Not so hood anymore. Single parent, mom, 4 kids. So all the stereotypical type stuff. We were the poor kids of the poor kids. But my mom was an educator. My whole family are educators. So we valued that. Worked my way through high school, graduated salutatorian of my high school class. That took me on to the University of Texas at Austin. Hook 'em Horns, big Horns fan there. There, I initially majored in chemical engineering. A lot of people don't know that about me, but then I realized that I didn't have enough money to have, because that was like a 5-year degree and I didn't have enough money. And so to graduate in 4, and my money was just going to add up for 4 years. And so and engineering wasn't really all that fun. So I took an elective class on economics, and man, I fell in love with economics. I love economics. Anybody hear me speak? I'm mostly talking a lot about economics and real estate second. And did that, but got through college, did all the mistakes that everybody else made, got a bunch of credit card debt that I couldn't pay for, but got a decent job. I worked at a company called Foley's Department Stores. Many of you might know it now as Macy's. They merged with Macy's about 3 years in. Now I got on that job. I thought that I was going to, because I was still I'm a millennial, but I might be on the slightly older side of the millennial. So I was still believing that, a company, like you could work for a company for 30 years. Like I was kind of in that weird generation where I bought into that still, work for a company, get a 401k and do all that jazz. Right. And so I came in there busting my butt, working hard and all that good stuff. 3 years in, I'm on the fast track. Everybody's liking me. I'm winning awards, whatever. And then, I get an email out they say, hey, yeah, we're merging with Macy's. And yeah, we don't need y'all division no more, which move or potentially get laid off. Now, the good news is I pretty much quickly found a job with JCPenney department stores. And when I was there, I was a buyer and a planner. And that whole career, and I'm still in that career, and it's a dope career. I teach on that. But I was really, really lucky. And I tell people that I was lucky because I learned early that it's not their job to get me rich. It really isn't. My job is to provide services and their job is to pay me, right? But not to get me rich, not to whatever, give me generational wealth, not to retire me early or even retire me at all. Like, it's not their job. And I think the previous generation kind of got caught up in that. And so I feel like I was lucky because I learned that lesson at 25. That led me to say, okay, if they're not going to do it, that means I got to do it. And if I got to do it, what's the path? And so much like many people, a good friend of mine put me on to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read Cash Flow Quadrant first, though. I think that's the better book. I did read both of them, but I think that's the better book. And then once you start reading that, then you kind of start jumping into real estate. You start talking about cash flow and passive income. So I spent about a year researching that. And then that made me say, I need to get my credit right. Because I had like crappy credit. Part of the story was that I had my college sweetheart with me and we moved from Houston to Dallas and she was moving for my quote unquote dope job. But then I had bad credit and I couldn't even get approved for an apartment. So all these things kind of happened in 1 year. And that really kind of motivated me to kind of say, okay, so you got bad credit and you majored in economics? Like, how that work? So like that doesn't make sense. So, I kind of started putting stuff together, started researching real estate, got on with another company, another Fortune 100 company, and I got on with them, and I was able to move back to Houston. And part of that move, we decided that we wanted to buy us a house because we're getting married. Same thing everybody else does, right? Big difference though. We started looking for a home. I went through the NACA program. Right when we started looking for a home, I want to say I bought my house 1 month after Lehman Brothers crashed. That changes the game a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was crazy. So we ended up buying a foreclosure because the market started moving that fast. Like, the movement of the market was like super fast, right?
Yeah.
So we did end up buying a foreclosure. That foreclosure was originally listed for 180. We got it for 135. Because that's just where the market was, right? Like, you could just go gangster on these banks, right?
It's not like that today, huh?
No.
Not as easy as it was.
Well, it wasn't easy then either, right? Because lending wasn't easy. You didn't have cheap money. You didn't have everybody teaching classes and courses. You didn't have Instagram. You didn't have Facebook. There was no information out there. And the whole world was on fire. Let's remember that. The world was on fire. People talking about the recession these days, that's a whole nother ball game. The world literally was on fire, and real estate was the cause. So I'm buying the cause of the world being on fire. That's a whole different game. Like, everybody loves real estate now, but back then it was like, you kind of stupid, bro. Like, like my friends is like, what did you bump your head somewhere? So are you not reading the news? So, we bought it for 135. I actually got a NACA 203K loan through FHA, which means they gave me money to rehab the property. So I had done my homework. You see what I'm saying? I had done the research. And so I ended up only having to bring $1,800 for taxes to the closing table. Okay.
Wow.
And they gave me $30,000 to rehab the property. So I did that, didn't know what I was doing, got cheated by some contractors, ended up having to paint the whole house myself because, my money was gone or whatever. But it was our house. And I knew that. And that was part of my strategy, was to play around on my property first, right? Even though I used some money. So 6 months later, even during the financial crisis, even though 6 months later, we're still in the middle of 500,000 jobs being let go every week, like every month, 500, 700. Like, it was that bad, right? Like, it was millions of jobs being lost, on a monthly basis. But I still had equity. And I got a new appraisal when that property was worth 240. And so I was like, whoa, what can I do with this equity thing y'all talking about? Right? And I had done some homework. And so I kind of fell into they didn't call it the BRRRR strategy back then. Okay. BRRRR strategy was invented by, or the acronym was kind of came up by, Bigger Pockets and all those guys or whatever. But back then, I was one of the original members on Bigger Pockets, and where it was just a website. Like, my join date is like 2009 or something. You know what I mean? Like,
wow.
Yeah. So, but they didn't have no podcasts or any of that stuff back then. So anyway, got the BRRRR, did a refinance, had $40,000 in my pocket. Mind you, my background, I ain't never seen that kind of money in my life. Right?
Life-changing money.
I'm balling in, right? So I'm still 26, but I did have a strategy. I did build out a strategy. And so I think maybe a couple of months later, we found another foreclosure listed for like 65. I offered the 40 because that's all I had. And you know what? They took it because that's the world. And I ain't have no money then. And I opened up a Home Depot card, and I used that with some sweat equity. And I want to say 2 weeks later, I had my first tenant at $900 a month, and I'm off to the races.
That's great. There's a lot to unpack there.
So I'm gonna leave it
there. Yeah, a lot to unpack from just, having that pivotal, what I call a red pill moment when something happens in your life and you have to make a decision, right? Your back is up against the wall. It's a pivotal change in your life that you have to do to, move yourself forward or put yourself in a better position to being, investing at the bottom, right? Investing when there's a crisis. I mean, I'm sure that there was some sort of fear, maybe, going in at the bottom, but, you probably coupled that with some research to help you back up, exactly what you were doing. But, starting at age 25, was there anything in your life that you had to go through that you figured out that, hey, this wealth journey, this is important to me, after even reading Rich Dad Poor Dad? Why real estate specifically?
Well, real simple. I hate it. I hated being poor. I hate it. Like when you really going hungry in life, that can be a hell of a motivator. And so being the poor kid among poor kids, you know what I'm saying? I got a whole lot of stories to tell you about being the poor kid among the poor kids. And so, that was a catalyst. Now, dope part about it is I had a mom that she got all four of us through college. All four of us graduated, right? Now everybody else is educators and I'm the black sheep or whatnot in business. But I've always had a fond understanding of business that has always kind of come easy to me. And I knew I didn't have no trust fund. I didn't have no money that, I can go. None of my friends had money. So like, where was I going to raise capital from? So, for me, it was real estate when you really dig in deep, because I looked into buying franchises, doing this, doing that, all that needed money. And if you back up my story, I found my first loan was a loan that I had 0% down. So, this was the lack of money actually made me think outside the box and try to figure out ways to kind of, how do I marry the two things together? Okay, I ain't got no money, but I hate being broke, right?
Mhm.
So you better use your brain and think through and dig through some crevices and figure it out.
No, it's something that I've had to come to terms with as well, as far as generating wealth and creating wealth, for my family as well. I myself, I came to this country when I was 10 years old, and we came with a bag of clothes. But fortunately, it seems like Rich Dad Poor Dad has helped more real estate investors than any other book
I
out
know so
there.
much book.
Every time I run into a real estate investor, it seems like Rich Dad Poor Dad is like the number one book. Kudos to Robert Kiyosaki. Okay, so you were working a job. There was a shift in the job itself, right? They were saying that they were merging, and so that forced you to move into other investments, specifically real estate, from reading and doing your research to eventually, investing in the downturn. So take me on a timeline from like doing that first bird deal, right? Taking that and then going to buy another property and then scaling up to like where you are today. Like, how have you been able to like accomplish that as well? I know you mentioned that you've scaled up, to 50 doors without using syndication.
Yeah. So one, I'm a bird guy, but like I said, I didn't know the formal definition of it. Like, and I'm a firm believer that bird is just real estate. So people saying, "Oh, well, you teach bird and I teach this," I'm like, "Well, no, I'm teaching real estate." I just think that's something that real estate investors gonna figure out one way or the other, right? So I didn't quite figure that out as a strategy. I just kind of slipped into it on my first property. The one we still live in this home, by the way. I'm in the original home that I bought on my bird deal. So understand I'm
Nice.
quite conservative. Okay. I don't need to keep up with the Joneses or any of that kind of stuff. Because I also read The Millionaire Next Door. That book stuck with me too. So there, I was buying in the down market. So properties were, I wouldn't say they were affordable for me because, 20 grand was a lot of money back then for me. 15 grand, money was still like, this was not
Yeah,
like,
especially in your mid 20s.
yeah, like I didn't have, like I said, a lot of stuff. So one thing first was, okay, that first deal, I'm renting out for $900 a month. I did get that cash out refi. That cash out refi notes, all in taxes and insurance, was $425. So I'm cash flowing $400. And back then, that $400 paid for a car note and insurance. Okay, so off bat, I'm saying, okay, my cash flow is going up. My wife was a teacher. I had a modest income that's modest today, but it was decent, right? We were middle class, but not balling, right? Teaching, ain't nobody balling on teacher salary. But what we always lived up on our means. Even the house that we live in today, we bought that under me and not her. So that was one thing that we never double debt. We always lived under one income. Again, that was very conservative. And so I was scratched. And one good thing about my current job is I did get a little bonus once a year. And instead of going on a trip or whatever, like everybody else do, that bonus went towards some type of purchase of real estate, right? And so I want to say, what was my second property? I want to say my second property, I didn't have no money, so I used hard money on that. Now I'm deep in the crisis right now. Okay. I'm like, this is 2009, so you deep into it.
Yeah.
So everybody use hard money today, and I'm like, man, y'all tripping because hard money is by definition hard. so, so I'm on hard money, and they like 2-3 points, 15-16% interest rates. This wasn't this little nice 7% interest rate people dealing with these days, right? Like
Yeah.
I was 15% interest rate. And more importantly, and I hate to call out some people, but there were zombie banks right now. You ever heard the term zombie banks? I'm not sure how
No, no, no. I'd love to learn more.
You never heard this term zombie banks?
Back in 2009, for context, I was like in the 11th or 10th grade. So
You remember too big to fail, right?
right.
Too big to fail basically meant that these banks should have failed, right? And we're talking about the big banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America, public knowledge. They should have failed, but the government did not let them. So the joke was that they were running around like a zombie because they was dead, right? And so, and this was like real life, like Bank of America, whatever. So I didn't quite understand this. I was reading this stuff in the news clippings, but I didn't understand what it meant. So what's the problem with most banks being zombie banks when you're talking about being a bird strategy guy and you're using hard money? How you gonna get the refi?
Right, exactly.
So I had a delicious deal. I'm talking about delicious, bro. Like this deal here was my second deal was $28,000. I got $8,000 from the hard money guy. So I'm in what? 36 grand. I'm in and out of this thing in 3 weeks, man. 3 weeks, I got the sucker ready, roof, all that, new AC unit. I'm good. I'm in there, 950. I don't care what market you in. That money add up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that money add up, but not to a zombie bank because they ain't got no money.
Yeah, was it an issue you couldn't refi out the property, or what happened?
I'm 3 weeks into this thing, ready, calling them back to refi. And I got a 6-month term. So they weren't giving out these 18-month. There wasn't no bridge financing. They definitely wasn't giving bridge financing on commercial back then. Like they ain't had this 12, 18-month hard money. It was 6 months to give me my money back when I'm taking your house, right? And ruining your credit. Like that's what it was back then. And so I'm 3 weeks calling them back. And I'm calling every bank under the sun. Oh, by the way, they didn't have temp to permanent financing back then either. They just had hard money refi with somebody else. Man, I'm calling everybody. Everybody either kicking the can, lying to me, saying that they can do the deal, kicking the can, or they just can't do the deal. Man, I'm 6 months into this sucker, still paying hard money, 15% prices at this. But I'm cash flowing. So I'm like, I'm stressing, but I'm not stressing. I'm stressing hard though, right? And so it took me 8 months. I had to get 2 extensions where I had to pay points on. Okay. Yeah, this is painful. On a good deal. This is a good deal. And so I had to do that. But I finally got it refied with a bank. But it wasn't even a bank. It was like a little local small lender bank or whatever. But I went to 3 of the zombie banks. They denied me. Everybody was denying me. I had good credit. I had decent credit at this point. Like everything on paper was right. So that taught me a hard lesson that, hey, man, you need to learn lending. So I definitely learned lending. I'm not a lender, but I know it very, very well. I know my lending products. If I'm going to get into it, and it scared me from doing hard money for a long, long time. And so from there, I just kept buying one property a year with some bonuses, with some extra cash or whatever I could do, whatever I could scramble up. I bought properties every way I could figure out how to buy property, right? It was going direct to seller, putting 20% down in some cases, getting a traditional 30. I always wanted to end up with a traditional 30. Let me be real clear about that. I'm a big fan of long-term cheap debt. That's how you win in this game. I don't believe in variable financing. I mean, get how you need to get in, but at the end of the day, you want to get some long-term cheap debt. So I'm buying one property a year, next couple years, and I'm starting to try to like get aggressive. And also I'm managing my own properties. I only got onesie twosies, right? So I'm learning rehabs. I'm rehabbing them all myself, right? So I'm learning different aspects of the game. And a couple more years go by, and my original goal was just to have 5. And I think I had 5. I want to say I hit my original goal was to have 5 paid off by the time I was 35. I'm pretty sure I hit that goal at 31. And if I can remember correctly. And then I kept buying, kept learning, moving faster. So each time I'm getting better, right? I'm moving quicker, getting better tenants, and, learn Section 8. I got a course on Section 8 coming out. Section 8 really got me through the hard times of the market. right? Because you get your rent paid on
Guaranteed money. I love it.
guaranteed money. I was buying in my own neighborhoods, my hood. I ain't never been afraid of my own people, whatever. And so, like I said, I'm kind of from the hood, so I can deal with situations that maybe the average person can't. And so I want to say this was about so years go by. So I get up to about 7, 8, 9. So once I start to get up 7, 8, 9, that's kind of where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get anxious because man, I just hit my goal, right? Now that goal based on me not having no kids. So I got 2 kids, and each time I all the property. We got a story where my wife was she was 1 week away from dropping the baby or whatever and her due date. And I decided to take a sledgehammer to one of our bathrooms to redo the bathroom before the baby got there. I got it done though. But I was very aggressive. I always use catalysts or hard financial times to propel me forward. So every time she got pregnant, I went out to got more aggressive. That means I got to pay for this kid because I didn't want my lifestyle to change, right? And I paid for this kid because guess what? This $400-$500 that I'm making, that's some money, right? That do something for me back then. So I got about 9 properties, and 7 or 8, I really started to get anxious that this thing wasn't moving fast enough. Because at this point, I'm buying in. I'm listening to Bigger Pockets every day. I'm listening to everybody every day. I'm listening to the real estate guys every day, which is a dope podcast, by the way. They're really good. And I'm like, why is this not moving? Why am I not retired? They told me that I was supposed to be rich, And that's kind of where I start to really dive into multifamily and understanding multifamily investing. And I got a real good story on how I got the multifamily, whenever you're ready. But I know I ramble.
That's great. I think thing in real estate is that, it's a long-term play, right? And if you're able to utilize something like the BRRRR strategy and continuously buy properties over time, I mean, that's literally how you create generational wealth. The cash flow is just a way to create those different streams of income and create that financial freedom so you can afford, trips and things with your family and not necessarily rely on just working a job. So how did you do all of that while working a job is my question, because that seems like you're doing a whole lot. How do you balance, when we talk about balancing a full-time job with real estate investing, how do you do that today?
You got to want it, man. Like you said, this ain't no get rich quick scheme. And this ain't no, a lot of people like, oh, well, you got to do this and you ain't got to do nothing. I don't know about all that, right? Like I work very, very hard. I'm social, I'm in the fraternity and all that. And there were times where I couldn't go to the party or I was coming to the party late because, I just finished the rehab and my guys need to be paid that night, right? Or whatever. And I would go, 11 o'clock at night to go pay my guys out so I would have the credibility with them so they could work harder, right? And, I was getting up and working 8 to 5. And I would come home and maybe kiss the wife and kiss the kids or not and go out here and go work. Go collect rent or what, back then I've always been digital with my rent collection, but whatever it was, I was doing it. And I'm not going to lie, when 4 or 5 properties with the right systems, using home warranties and digital payments and stuff like that, I mean, you can do that and it's not be a burden. And so really, I would say my first, 7, 8 years, it definitely was passive. So I want people to understand that it can be passive. My first 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 properties. It can be passive. I think once you start to get above 6, you need to start thinking about things differently, right? But you can do this on your own with 5, I think. And again, like you said, burn it, scrapping dollars together, making sacrifices. I drove the same beat up Camry for, 12, 13 years. So I was making those type of financial sacrifices, right? That other people would, ball on. So I was making those, but from a work perspective, it was a lot of balance. I got a lot of crazy stories. I mean, I had to travel for work. I had a 3-year span where I would travel like 8 times a year on the plane and stay away for like a week or whatever. So that you had to kind of build some systems, right? Somebody called with a leaky toilet, like they need their toilet fixed, man, or whatever, right? They got Houston, something flood or whatever. So we had a lot of that kind of stuff go on, but it definitely took some balance. Real estate became a hobby for me, a fun hobby. I enjoyed the game. So if you don't enjoy some aspect of real estate, whether it could be design, construction, rehab, analysis, something that's going to be tough to balance. But for me, plenty of night where, I'm watching TV or my wife's watching TV, I'm on my phone looking at properties. That's what I did for fun.
You sound like me.
Yeah, we all the same, man. It's the same. So if you're not really doing that, then it's going to be tough to balance, right? So balancing becomes a lot easier when it's not work, and it is work. But when it's like, oh yeah, I mean, I'm gonna make 50 on this deal, okay? Like when you thinking
Mhm.
like that, or I'm gonna make X amount of cash flow, then it gets a lot easier.
That's a great story. I think, if you want to be a big time or you want to grow your portfolio and be a big active investor, you have to have some sort of passion for this game because there's so many issues that happen on a daily basis. And especially when you are growing your real estate company, you have to deal with all of the growing pains, and you mentioned, I think the sweet spot is, once you start crossing 5 doors, you're building a business, right? You
Yeah,
have to start creating those systems. Somebody's going to have to answer those maintenance tickets. Somebody's going to have to, do a lot of things that might be small and, requires a lot of time, but at the end of the day, somebody has to do that until you're able to like hire someone, and we can talk about scaling from there. But that's awesome. So let's talk about your first multifamily deal. Let's first talk about why did you transition from the single family space to multifamily? What caused that transition
it
from
took a
just a
while.
mindset perspective?
So one, again, since I'm a little bit dating myself, I'll kind of give you guys frame of reference. So there were plenty coaches back in the day that would tell you that single family was better than multifamily. And they had great arguments, quality of tenant, longevity. And I don't think they're wrong necessarily. So for me, it was very important when I went up to multifamily to not give up my single families. Now, I think every guru now will tell me to sell off the 9 portfolio, get your cash, and go do a big deal, right? Like that's the move, right? Because I've gotten that advice like 1,000 times. But for me, I did have kids and I did care about generational wealth. So me keeping the single families were more about them and making sure I had something to the side that I could just pick off, right? Because single families you can sell quicker, things like that, right? Higher appreciation potential. But at the end of the day, multifamily is multifamily. You got one roof, you got one location, right? You got economies of scale. That's the word, right? That's the word with multifamily. It's about economies of scale, being able to fix one plumbing line once, being able to fix one electrical panel once, right? Or 20, but all in one blow, right? That is important. Not to have this piecemeal of stuff breaking on you all the time, one location. My time was getting more problematic. So I can't drive around 30 single families across Houston, right? So that was the catalyst. I do have a pretty cool story. Back during the crisis, two of the properties I bought at the same time from a wholesaler friend of mine who's a realtor, really good. That same friend that gave me that Rich Dad Poor Dad book, he wholesaled
Mhm.
me properties from a lady whose husband passed away, who's kind of like an old school investor like me, and she just wanted to dump the properties because she couldn't handle them, right? And this is during the crisis, so all kind of mess is going down, right? He sold me those units. She didn't want to bother the tenant, so I had to buy them sight unseen. I could just drive by, but I couldn't get inside.
Pretty risky there.
Yeah, pretty risky, right? What was cool is he was an old school investor. They had a package portfolio of like 30, and he literally had 25 of them, like literally on the same block that he would walk around to pick up his rent, which is kind of crazy, right? And he lived like in the middle. It was like it was a really cool situation, right? I could tell from the outside he had decent roofs, he had decent AC units, and that told me that he at least took care of the property. And because I had that much landlord experience, right? I didn't have a ton of doors, but I had enough to know that, right? And I told my friend, I said, "Hey man, the price got to come down." He's like, "Yeah, we're going to do the deal. You got this $10,000 wholesale fee from me." I'm like, "Yeah, the price is right." Long story short, we bought those units 21 grand a piece. That's including
Wow.
his wholesale fee. So I'm all in for $42,000. Okay, for two properties that was rented at 900 a piece. That's good math anyway you look at it, right? So that's
Yeah.
18 for 40 grand. But again, we're still in a crisis, right? So everybody ain't buying. And that had to be a cash deal. So where you gonna get the cash from? And I just told you about the hard money situation, right? So this ain't is a layup like people think. I had about 45 grand worth of stock for my current company. Okay. That was all of our savings. That's a
Mhm.
401k that you really couldn't touch, but that really wasn't no money in that. And I told my wife, I said, hey, man, you cool with me dumping all of our savings in this investment that we couldn't get into? And she said, cool. So
Oh, was it that easy?
it was actually, she probably was like, is it a good deal? And I was like, yeah, I think so. She's like, well, go for it then. So always been very supportive. So we did that. We bought them cash, because I had cash flow at this point, and these properties making $1,800, whatever. I didn't immediately do a bird deal on that. Probably like another 2 years later, I really started to get more comfortable with debt, because with bird, you got to be comfortable with debt, right? And that's not all that comfortable with everybody, right? So I did, and at the same time, I'm looking at multifamily. So I cashed those out a couple years later. They both was worth about $150K. So I get about $200,000 between the two properties, like literally a couple years later, right? Mm-hmm. 200 in my pocket. Now I could do something, right? And I'm using my skills that I had learned along the way, going direct to seller. So I was able to go direct to seller for a 21 unit multifamily, negotiate down. At this point, we are licensed as a team. My wife is licensed. So we kind of know some tricks. I got some tricks up my sleeve now. I ain't a full-blown rookie. And at this point, I had 9 properties too, right? So I felt I was comfortable as a landlord to level up. But in reality, I was going from 9 to 21. So I was tripling my portfolio, so to speak. So we used that 200, bought a 21 unit complex for $1.2 million. I didn't have a ton of money after that. So I didn't have no bridge finance. Bridge finance still really wasn't all that popular back then. Okay.
Yeah.
And I went one by one, rehabbing them, all that good stuff. And, one by one, building it up, stabilizing the property. We had dope dealers there. We had ladies of the night there. We had all kind of ratchetness there. Okay. And I had to work all those tenants, get them all out, clean them up, do all that kind of stuff. And got a $2 million valuation. That was 3 years ago. We had a $2 million valuation, and I got my first Fannie Mae small balance loan on that property on my cash out refi. So that was pretty cool. And then that kind of leveled me up to kind of look at some other stuff. I really debated hard around going up or going sideways. I think most successful syndicators and people who are really leveling up, they will go up, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, I understand how the market changes. I also, at this point, was managing 30 properties while working a full-time job. So at this point, I wasn't in no rush to be like, let me get 100 doors. So what I did was I actually I bought a Aplex through learning more about short-term rentals. And we turned that into a boutique hotel, same bird move, except now we're accelerating cash flow, right? A lot of cash flow on that thing. And then about 2 months ago, I just bought another 12 unit. That won't necessarily be a short-term rental, but that was just a great deal that I was able to get direct to seller again. So for me, one of my big ones is just that buy right. I just start with the B, man, on Burr. You got to buy right. All that 4 or 5% cap rate type of mess, I ain't really with that. Like I'm not with that at all, because that's just an indicator that your cash flow ain't there. I don't really make assumptions in real estate. That's kind of like my other thing too. I don't really make assumptions about the market future. I do a lot of market analysis. I do a lot of market thinking, right? But I am a multiple exit strategy guy, and I do not assume that I know I can force appreciation through raising rents and valuing the property, which I've become very good at. But I don't assume that cap rates are going to go down. I don't assume interest rates are going to stay at a certain place. That's why I like to try to lock in my debt when I can in the moment. Forget the future. Like, you want to look in the future and think, right? But also, I'm big about, if I feel like I got a good interest rate right now and get some cash out, I'm going to take that move. And if there's times where, so like last year, I spent the whole year cash out refinancing because it was cheap interest rates. I got a property right now where I know I got $600,000-$700,000 into. I know it, but it ain't the best time doing that, right? Not from a long-term debt perspective. So I'll leave the money in there a little bit. That probably differs me than most bird guys. I think a lot of the coaches tell you to get out and get your money back in 6 months. I mean, yeah, cool if you can, but real estate is dope. And the dope part about real estate is that time is our friend. I'm not one to max out my equity all the time. I like to kind of be at a good, healthy spot equity-wise, because vacancy is real. Cash flow is real, right? Paying bills, repairs are real. And so I like to have heavy cash. And, I like to have cash, but I like to have cash flow as well. I like the balance of it. It ain't all about getting the cash at the end of the day. And it ain't all about the cash flow either. So I like to have a decent balance. And that's typically lower than the 75% LTV.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. I think cash flow is my strategy as well. We can sit here and try to, evaluate, hey, where's the market going to be from a cap rate perspective, try to add, 10 basis points per year, which is the standard on some sort of cap rate expansion on your property when you're projecting an exit. I mean, that's why I really love multifamily, right? Because it's the in-place cash flow that you can get at an attractive debt on your property is important as well. And then also you de-risk yourself, compared to single family. But to your point as well, there are opportunities in the single family space to cash flow as well for people who are looking to scale up. I mean, I still own my single families as well.
They're more liquid. That's a fact.
Yeah.
If you only need $100,000, right? Why do a cash out for, like you only need $100,000, right? Or I just need this. I can go sell a single way faster than a multifamily. Like that's just a fact, right? So I like that liquidity. I haven't done that yet, but I know I could, and that option is advantageous for me.
Yeah, no, 100%. So how did you perform due diligence, on this 21 unit? Was the property located in a rough area? I know you said, it had some dope areas on there. Talk about that a little bit.
I did study macro and microeconomic theory at the University of Texas. So, I might be from the hood, but I do know my numbers very well. I've always done the strategy of investing before quote unquote gentrification. That's based on institutional knowledge. When I talk about institutional knowledge, I know my neighborhoods. I know my zip codes. I go to city council meetings. I go to these things. I watch. I pay attention to what's happening in the city. I use what I think is kind of common sense, but not so common. It's just basic core fundamentals. How close is this property away from a freeway? I'm a block and a half away from a major freeway in Houston, even though it's the hood. I'm also 10 minutes away from downtown, even though it's the hood. I'm 15 minutes away from the airport, IHA airport. That's one of the largest airports in the country, right? That's pretty cool, even though it's in the hood. I'm 15 minutes away from our medical center, even though it's the hood, right? So these are the things that I looked at, that I saw, and I said, okay, and here's probably the biggest reason why I bought this property, even though it was in the hood. We were kind of isolated. There were no other apartments in a couple miles away, right? Like my comps we were kind of isolated, which kind of hurt from a comp perspective, but also helped. There wasn't a ton of single family. So we're across the street from a very, very large park. And the park wasn't crazy dangerous. It wasn't mess going on. So literally I'm looking around, I'm saying, well, why do I got all this craziness in my apartment? Oh, it's me. It's my apartment that's the problem. The previous landlord is the problem, right? Well, guess what? I've been solving my own problems the whole time. So all I had to do was, okay, this area really isn't bad. It's the property that I just bought that's bad. So guess what? I can fix that. See, that's different than the whole area being terrible. That's a little bit harder to fix, but I can fix my own problem by doing some of the things. I knew how to tenant screen. We knew how to work Section 8 and find good people on Section 8, right? We knew how to rehab, right? We knew how to make a quality product, affordable housing, but good people, right? Like everybody's not bad people in affordable housing, right? I like to go get grandma. That's my avatar. We talk about avatars, right? And so I also come from a marketing and branding background that I didn't really talk about, but I also understand that, right? So I have a confluence of data, common sense, institutional knowledge, understanding avatars and how to market to them, so I can find some ideal candidates to help me stabilize this asset. So that's kind of how I approached it. And really, that's kind of how I approach all my deals like that. Who am I serving? Who's going to be? What does the ideal tenant look like? A lot of my single families. I love truck drivers. I love nurses. I love teachers. I love blue collar people that got blue collar jobs that just go to work and work hard, right? These are the people that I like. Even within Section 8, all my tenants, I maybe got like 2 or 3 tenants that don't work, and that's maybe because they're on disability or something like that, right? But for the most part, all my tenants work, right? Money just don't add up. So I can understand this, right? Because I grew up, that was me, that was my mom, right? So we could understand that, and I was able to use my background as a benefit, right? Being the po kid among po kids, I could point out the people who were good people, and that was a great way
Mhm.
for us to property.
I think, one of the things that's important to note is that, real estate is obviously all about location, right? And you were able to find a good deal in a location that was likely turning around, right? You were able to find a property that needed some sort of work and love and attention and turn that property around in a market that's changing. And that's really where you can make a lot of money in real estate, is what I call level one, where you have a property in an area where investment is coming. You might start to see, maybe one or two shovels in the ground, but that is essentially the areas what are called path to progress areas,
Yeah.
areas that are turning around. There's liquidity coming into the market, and there's certainly, an abundance of opportunities. So, kudos to you for being able to sniff out that opportunity when
Yeah,
others
don't be
probably
the
would have ran
first.
away from it.
Yeah, most people will. Don't be the first. Don't be the last. If you can be second mover position, that's kind of what I call it, right? Like you can win. And I agree. Like, but see, I also will say this. And see, I'm not a yield play only guy, right? I need equity and cash flow because I'm taking shots. I'm betting the farm. I'm betting my family's livelihood, right? I got to be on it, right? I'm betting that last savings. Now I ain't doing so much of that no more. We're in a much better place. But the way I'm looking at it is, I want good deals. All this mess is work. This is not easy to go find these type of deals. So when I get them, I'm trying to get them. Now I'm not doing a deal every month and all that kind of stuff. I'm not doing 20 wholesale deals a month. I don't do that, right? I'm taking my shots strategically. That's part of having to work, right? So the fact that I'm working, I don't have the time to go out and do all these crazy deals all the time. So they gotta hit, right? And it's about taking chances. And guess what? In the game, we are problem solvers, right? And real estate is a people business. It's about location, but it's about people. It's about problem solving. And can you solve a problem that the next guy couldn't, or the last guy couldn't, right? And so for me, definitely my three multifamily purchases, there were clear indications that the current owner could not solve a problem. The first deal, the current owner could not handle the illegal activity that was going on. My second multifamily purchase, the current owner lived in Shanghai and had a rundown property that was falling apart and didn't care,
Mm.
right? And my third owner was 91 and his daughter was 67 and she was done. And oh, by the way, they had 12 messed up breaker boxes that they couldn't afford to rehab. So these
Mhm.
are all things that I was able to solve in these three different scenarios. But gone are the days. 5, 6 years ago, if I would have gotten multifamily, much earlier, I could have got some of these quote unquote easy yield play deals. But those deals ain't here, right? And that's part of the game too. You got to get what you get, right? And you just work the best of it. And if you can problem solve, so one, if you can identify, I think it's the identification first, right? Seeing an opportunity where everybody else can't. Then two, figuring out what is making this seller distressed to sell, because ain't nobody selling no perfect property, right? People don't do that. The property's cash flow rate, they're not selling it. Okay, so something's wrong with the property. If you don't know what it is, you better figure that mess out real quick, right? And then third, if you can solve that problem that you've identified, I think if you can do those things, you got room for success.
I 100% agree. We get paid, as entrepreneurs to solve problems, right? All of the companies, the biggest companies in the world, they have solved a problem that, the consumers are looking to be solved, right? And so I think even more important in today's environment, when we talk about trying to get deals to pencil, trying to find good opportunities, it's about finding the little problems on, these, assets, and figuring out, what's the best way to capitalize on it. Or, how can your management company or your operational expertise,
Yeah.
turn these properties around to produce a higher cash flowing asset. So being able to spot little opportunities in real estate is so key to, growing a huge portfolio, or even growing, a small portfolio, or even just scaling your portfolio, period, when other
Yeah.
people are turning away from opportunities. So that's great. So why did you turn from the multifamily space to the short-term rental space? Was that more so of an opportunity for you to find more cash flow, or was that an opportunity you spotted that the market needed? I'm curious about that change.
So one, I've always been inquisitive, and I love challenges, and I love to what I call joke about exercising my brain. So that's just kind of something I'm into, right? But in reality, somebody said something very profound. A couple people. I had some mentors. I didn't have a ton, but I've had some mentors over the years. I remember one of them. He was killing it. He was kind of like where I'm at when I was like getting one, right? He had all kind of property, and I remember I ran into him when I was like 7 or 8 units in. And I'm like, man, what you doing? Like, what you buying right now? What you whatever? And he's like, man, I bought $6-7 million worth of real estate. He's just a mom and pop investor too, just like me. And he's like, man, I bought $7 million worth of real estate in my career. Man, I'm just managing my portfolio at this point. I'm good. So I got the idea that, you ain't got to buy forever. Mm-hmm. And then years later, someone dropped this gem on me, and it's simple, but it's a gem, not the same. She said, I want to make as much money as possible. Check. We all want to do that. But on as least properties as possible. And I said, okay, because at this point I've been in the game for like 13, 14 years. So I understood, you got to manage these things for years. You know what I'm saying? I've managed this thing for years. So I understand this ain't, peaches and cream all the time. So I thought that was a gem. And so I really thought about how do I manage, because let's call a spade. Wherever you're going to learn multifamily, I've done all the classes and whatever. I've done a lot of education in multifamily, long-term rent, right? I like know all the stuff, the syndication. I know all the stuff that they teach, right? Well, most of these classes will teach you that it's okay to make $150 or $200 or $250 of cash flow per unit as long as you got multiplication on your side, right? As long as you got 100 doors, I mean, you got make $200, you're good, right? Mm-hmm. This is and I ain't saying anything wrong, but I am gonna tell you, one leaky toilet takes out your profits for the month, and one broken AC will absolutely take out your profits for the year. I know that to be fact. Mm-hmm. So that tells me that something's not quite right with this equation, which is why I never, all my single families cash flow over 500. And for me, I needed higher, hence me shooting more 3-pointers. I need a higher equity. And so even still, I really started to look at the short-term rental. I always wanted to get into short-term rentals for a lot of reasons, but basically short-term rentals solve several problems for me. One, it solved higher cash flow. Okay. 2, it also forced me to build some systems that traditional long-term rental landlords don't have. And these systems are becoming very advantageous for me right now, even in my long-term rental business. So I had to learn some different things that they're not teaching in the long-term rental multifamily books. And more importantly, though, it opens up an opportunity for lifestyle. So a lot of us, you probably in this boat, I had dreams or aspirations, like I'm getting into real estate now. So I started had dreams or aspirations of owning some really cool stuff. Like at what point do you get to own cool property, right? Cool property might buy some property in Mexico or in the Caribbean. That's cool, right? I think it's cool. Or buying that lake house, buying these starter home, these secondary, more luxurious type of properties, right? We all kind of dream of that, but like me, I'm pragmatic and I'm like, that ain't gonna really happen. I'm like, I'm gonna learn about it, but that ain't really gonna happen. Well, short-term rentals actually opens up this opportunity for me because of the systems, because of the nature of the clientele and things of that nature. There's properties that I can now buy that can cash flow, but did not fit into the box of traditional multifamily. Because ultimately, why are you doing this? You're doing this for lifestyle, are you not?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're doing it for financial freedom. I realized that I really wasn't heading down the path that I had originally told myself that I was going to be down. And here's what's crazy. I have students. I have literally students that I taught that got 500 doors. And I had to ask myself, is this what I want? Because of ego to tell people that I need to have 500 doors? Or do I want $50,000 a month in cash flow? So which one do you want? You want the 500 doors or the 250 doors to get $50,000 in cash flow? Or do you just want $50,000 in cash flow? Well, I just want $50,000 in cash flow. Yeah. And now, granted, I say all this today, more than likely, I'm probably going to syndicate and raise some capital and go buy a whole bunch more doors at some point because I'm addicted. But, I can do that on my own terms. And, we're in a place now where we're not 100% there, but my wife was able to retire last year and she's helping manage the property. I'm not retired, but I can safely say I'm financially free. I can safely say I'm free, which most people can't. And so That's what short-term rental does. I don't know how long this market's gonna last. I don't know about regulation or whatever. I did buy this property with multiple streams of exit strategies, for so to speak. So I do have a lot of exit strategies in my gun now. I can always rent it on traditional rent, still make money. I can rent on Section 8, make money. I can go do VA, make money. I can go do government contracts and make money. I can go short-term rental and make money. I can do midterm rentals and make money, which we're doing now. So I'm doing a lot of different things. It's not traditional vacationer. We get a lot of travel nurses, all that kind of stuff. I was strategic in the property. So I'm not one of the people that say, oh, put all your properties on short-term rentals, because we haven't yet. I just got one building on short-term rentals as a boutique hotel. And then we'll start to expand and see if it makes sense. But I'm a crawl before you walk guy. I'm not dumping all the way in. And so far, I like it. And it has changed quite a few things to the good. There's a lot of stuff to learn, and we'll see how long it lasts. But at the end of the day, if I can make more money today, and if I just do it for 3 years, that extra cash flow dramatically changed the performance of this property.
Is this another BRRRR deal that you did for the 8-unit short-term rental, utilizing the BRRRR strategy on the short term, the boutique hotel, or how did you kind of go through that deal? Was it stabilized?
No, I'm a value add investor regardless. Okay, I'm not buying retail ever. Okay, so like that's not part of my formula. Like hence what you remember I said earlier, BRRRR is real estate, and if you're not really doing BRRRR, then I don't know if you're really doing real estate. So let me just be real clear about that, right? So I mean that might be a little controversial, but that's how I feel. So this was a rundown property in the hood, owned by some Chinese nationals that didn't live in America. See what I'm saying? This was a whole lot. I mean, this is how bad. Let me tell you how bad this property was. We just dealing with last unit right now, fooling with it. There were multiple tenants that hadn't had gas in like 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
So like no heat. Now, granted, it's Houston, so they ain't got to have that much heat, but no heat, and they were cooking on hot plates because they had gas ovens, and they. This is how terrible this living situation. Yeah. So for me, and I'm about to get passionate now. This is why I do this. Right. So if you kind of hear the 3 properties I bought, these are all, for lack of a better word, crappy landlords. And so now I get to redevelop my own community. And I'll be honest, I tell people never to buy on emotion. I did buy this 8-plex on emotion because it was on the same street that I grew up in. I literally grew up 5 blocks away from this 8-plex. I saw the property in disarray, so I just didn't buy it off of it. It made sense within my criteria. Right? It made sense with something that I wanted to try, which is short-term rentals. So it was a confluence and emotional, frankly, and I get to say I redeveloped my own community that I literally grew up in. And this community just so happened to be one of the hottest communities in all of Texas, or I would say America, frankly, because Third Ward, I mean, people hear about Turkey Leg Hut and some of the places in Third Ward, like national, right? And so it was all kind of timed up properly to where there was a lot of reasons to buy this property, even though it wasn't the 40 or 50 units that I was really intending to buy, if that makes sense. Like I was intending to level up. I would argue that this property is the first of hopefully many of properties that we now as a family can enjoy. 2 weeks ago, me and my wife literally went on a staycation to live in our own apartment because this is how area is. This people go on vacation, like my clients are coming on vacation to have fun. So we literally went to go stay at our own property for like 4 or 5 days and had a great time there. Like it was a whatever, great experience. So that for me, from a lifestyle perspective, it starts to change the game. And then once you see that, I'm like, okay, well, what else I could buy? So we're gonna start looking at lake houses and stuff like that. And I've got a trip. I gotta make sure I go. But I got a friend that invited me down to Costa Rica. And I'm going to go check out his joint that he got down there. And, I'll be looking at property there. So now I'm starting to look at property differently. And I'm saying to myself, okay, if I could go buy a lake house that cash flows 10 or 15 grand a month, why would I go buy 30 units of headaches?
Yeah.
Not to say it's against it. I still love multifamily, but you understand we're just
well, you're running to the cash flow, which is what it seems like, right? You're running to the cash flow, the one that has the least amount of headaches that makes the most money possible. One of the things that I really love about real estate and why I got into it as well is just a double bottom eye investment that you can do, which is income and impact, creating that cash flow that you can generate on a monthly basis, but also impacting your community. A lot of the areas that are turning around are happening in communities that need change, right? That need, positivity coming through it. So that's an amazing story of how you were able to turn that around.
I'm gonna give you credit, but I'm still in that.
So let me ask you this, if you were to start this entire thing over again, this entire marathon, what would you do differently?
My starting points were my starting points. That's not gonna change. Mainly because that's what I mean. I don't see a way for me to buy property any smarter starting out the gate than what I did. Okay. But I think I'll tell you where I screwed up over the year. I wouldn't call it screw up, but I'll tell you where I need to partner more, and I should have partnered earlier. I should have gotten the multifamily earlier. If I would have gotten the multifamily 2 years earlier and I had the capacity to do it, I had the capital to do it, man, I'd be super wealthy.
In a market like Houston, that's a good market.
Yeah, some of the properties that we're buying at, that are quote unquote good deals at 75, 80,000 a door. I mean, I know I signed the listings. Like I have the savings. Like I've saved, let me be clear, I've saved every deal I've ever underwrote. And typically I'm underwriting 8, 9, 10 deals before I'm actually buying something, right? And so I'm looking at some of these deals that I passed on at like 30,000 a door, right? And so I'm like, man. So if I would have partnered earlier, if I would have got more education earlier, so I'm self-educated. Truth be told, I've never bought a course like at all. Never joined formally a RIA. I went to a lot of RIA meetings, but never become an official paid member because I was one of those cheap guys. So I think I probably should have gotten a lot more paid education earlier to get there quicker. I've had to kind of create my own blueprint, which gives me the knowledge that I have today, but I didn't have to go that hard. I made things a lot harder than what it needed to be, whether that's education, using other people's capital, raising capital, understanding debt better. So those are the type of things I probably should have done, jumping into multifamily and understanding the multiplication of that better. So if I did that earlier, I would be a lot further along. But guess what, man? Look, I'm barely 41, and that's, a little bit long in the tooth, but, I got a couple more years in me, and I feel good about where I'm at today. And I'm a big fan of people finding their own journey as well. I'm a big, big fan of that. And I'm not one to look at the Joneses either. Like I said, I got a student, he got 500 units, and I taught him, right? But he got to where he got to, and his temperament's his temperament, right? Mm-hmm. And mine. So that's cool. Now he's syndicated and raised capital, whatever. And for me, I've always been very cautious around taking other people's money. That was something that I'm very, very, I grew up watching shows like American Greed. So I was like, man, I don't ever want to be on that show. So we get to where we get to. I'm happy with the journey that I've been on. Definitely could have improved, but if you telling me a kid from Third Ward that grew up in poverty could have 50 doors and be on your podcast, then that ain't bad.
Well, that's amazing story, success story. And that's, kudos to you and all the hard work for the past 15 years that you've been putting into, secure your family's wealth and create that financial freedom. Two things that stuck out to me is one, just being able to go back if you can and find that mentor or find that help, it probably help you, accelerate your path a little bit further than you would have to do it all by yourself, right? I think we all can have those small little moments and say, well, I probably should have asked for help for this specific reason or for that specific reason. And then the second thing is just the partnership level. Real estate is a team sport, and sometimes partnerships can help you get to where you want to get to further. And so I'm all about partnerships and finding synergies and with other investors to go out there and do it together, because at some point everybody runs out of money at some point, right? And whether your goal is to scale up and have $1 billion of real estate or, just sit back and wait till great opportunities come, at some point the capital sources start to tap out, So, man, this was a great time learning more about you. If anyone wants to know about you or your coaching programs, or just follow Onaje and just learn more about what he's got going on, how can our listeners follow you?
Yeah, simple, onaje10k.com. That's ONAJE 10k.com. That'll pretty much lead to all my social media platforms, whatever coaching programs or classes I got coming up at any given time. You can kind of hit that up and see what I got going on. Most of the time I'm on IG or something like that, just giving out some free game or doing pop-ups, random lives, just showing you guys what I got going on. Because for me, I didn't have a lot of education coming up, as I just told you. And some of the reason why I did not ask for help is because I was shunned earlier from being in certain types of rooms, right? My era, and I mean, I'm not crazy older than you, but my era did not have the social media stuff that's out there today. My era did not have, they had RIAs where, it'd be 300 people in a room and I might be one of like 2 people that look like me. And, people weren't all that cool with trying to give me no game. Right. So, I would just tell people, capitalize on the era that you're in. Once upon a time, people didn't have cell phones. Okay, now we got cell phones. Use these suckers, right? Use this technology, use these resources, use social media, use the help that's being available to you as best you can, whether that's YouTube University or paying for somebody's course, whatever you need to do. For me, like I said, you had to kind of read these books. It wasn't people on YouTube whiteboarding up stuff or whatever, So, but I'm still thankful for where I got to today. And like I said, it's I've had to learn these lessons, like you was just saying, using synergies, putting teams together. Now this is kind of my strength, because it's kind of like, okay, I've got the knowledge. I've always been a people person. And now I've got the confidence that, okay, if I'm raising capital, that I feel good about, frankly, I might just do a better job than them. That for me is probably, what I really needed to gain was, I never lacked confidence on succeeding in a deal. I just needed more confidence in knowing that, what? Yeah, I can probably make more money for somebody than they could themselves. And that's doing them a service. Right. So, but now I'm here, and so we'll see what the future holds. And I'm just a real estate junkie, so I'm sure I do plan on getting some larger units, and I plan on jumping into the triple net space on the back half of this year too. So for me, I'm constantly looking for a better and better portfolio balancing. That's kind of where I'm at now. I want to balance my portfolio based on lifestyle. I'm moving more towards this lifestyle of saying, what do I want my portfolio to look like and what type of assets I want in the portfolio. A year and a half ago, it was all multifamily. Today it's, what do I want? I don't know if I want all, so it's a different world, but it's fun. The journey is absolutely fun, guys. Don't try to skip the journey either.
Yep, you have to enjoy the journey in real estate. And to your point about balancing a portfolio, I agree with that, because multifamily is, although it's a great investment vehicle and it's, recession resistant, it is very management intensive to a degree versus a triple net lease that is, you can pass down the expenses to other tenants, and you have a lease with a business that might close at around 5 o'clock, and you don't necessarily have to answer to a lot of maintenance because the tenant takes care of it as well. So that balancing aspect is something that I think it comes with the wisdom that you've grown with, over time, right? You start off in, multifamily probably because, that's something that you could have afforded from single to multifamily. And now you're growing your portfolio, and now you can transition into the more passive type investments of triple net and just sitting back and collecting checks, right? Because in the triple net lease, they handle the repairs, they handle the insurance costs, right? From a bill back perspective. So it's definitely more passive from that perspective and less management intensive than multifamily.
You're absolutely right. But, it takes time to get that wisdom to kind of understand that and building off of what you already know, right? So, single family, multifamily makes sense. It doesn't make sense to go single family to triple net. Like that kind of don't make sense, right? You need to know how to underwrite. Multifamily is going to teach you how to underwrite. Like you're going to know how to underwrite if you're going to be successful in multifamily, and you're going to have to underwrite well. And what's crazy is that when you move to triple net, it's the same underwriting. It's the same math. The math is exactly the same, and it's probably easier because you got less units, right? Like the capital, the assets probably cost the same, but instead of managing 50 doors, you might be managing 8, right? And that is actually less work. But again, you're not jumping into that unless you actually know financing. Multifamily teaches you high level financing, right? It teaches you high level underwriting. It teaches you how to squeeze every dollar to the NOI line. You better learn how to squeeze every dollar, right? And this serves you well as you move into different asset classes, I think.
No, 100%. Great stuff. Hey, so I really appreciate you being on the platform today. Thank you to all the listeners that are tuning into the Mogul Marathon Real Estate Podcast. This was an awesome show. And thanks so much, Onaje, for being here today.
Man, appreciate the invite, man. And you guys get out there, man. Just go make something happen. Just whatever you can do, go get something.
Absolutely good stuff. Thanks a lot.